Okay, well, let's get started with our program. Tonight, our webinar is Countering California's Gender Ideology Laws with attorney Erin Friday. We're so lucky to have Erin for our conversation. She's the co-lead of Our Duty USA, an advocacy group raising awareness of the harms of the gender industry, and the executive committee member for Protect Kids California. California plays such an important role in setting legislative agendas across our country, and it's been in the forefront of passing legislation that places adult decisions in minors' hands. The California legislature has been passing a multitude of laws that are designed to force parents to transition their kids, force schools to deceive parents, and break up the family unit, promoting transgenderism in the classroom and shelve pornographic books. California is the first transgender sanctuary state with the passage of SB 107 back in October of 2022. And its laws have turned California into the transgender capital of the country, where minors and medical providers can flee to avoid their own state's prohibitions against gender interventions. As the Western region lead of Our Duty, Erin is fighting the state-sponsored overreach. And so I'm just so honored to have her here. And so, Erin, I think just a good place to start off is just to discuss, how did you get involved in this issue? How did it come to your doorstep?
The gender fairy made its way into our home through the public school, which is a story. If people here have children in the public school, that's usually the entry point through the sex ed curriculum or the teachers asking for pronouns and names. And my daughter was young, so she was 13 when she took on that identity, which gave me some time and some control. And I was able to extract her from the gender web after a year and a half of really hard work, diligence. Family called on everyone to help, and it's a happy ending because my daughter is now 17 and fully comfortable in her beautiful, perfect female body, unaltered.
Yeah, I mean, it's a story we're just hearing from so many parents, across the country, that school is an entry point, and then can just really go down this very scary pathway. So I'm so glad that your daughter's okay. I mean, do you want to share with us just the California legislation and how the environment there, it really puts this sort of superhighway, so to speak, of all this information and all the different domains, schools, et cetera. But maybe, start by just sharing with us the legislative landscape.
Well, I want to go back to when it started, which is pretty interesting. Most people don't know this, but it started, at least in California, in 1999 by a assemblywoman named Sheila Co, who I would have lauded because she was the first out lesbian assembly member. And she went to Harvard. She was a former child star. She worked in areas to protect women from domestic abuse. So sort of, would have been my hero. And she was the one who started this incrementalism of going into various existing laws and starting to take little bites out of them to add gender into the California laws. And she did it very strategically and along with some of her colleagues. So she went into, let's say, the penal code for a kind of a hate law, and then threw gender identity into there. And nobody was the wiser because we weren't paying attention to any of this, including myself. And I'm a licensed attorney, but you're raising your kids and you're working your job and you're coming home and making dinner and going to sports events. You're not really paying attention to what the legislator's doing. And from 1999, it just progressively gets worse. Every year there's another bill, there's another way that they start moving towards where they're redefining sex to mean gender identity. And so it's happening very slowly and methodically. What is also happening is they're starting to push it into the education code. So adding that sex ed curriculum needs to include a lesson on gender identity, the bathroom bills. So these all come very slowly, strategically, over a long period of time until we get to where we are today, which is there is no definition of female or male in the California codes, and almost in every state in the nation, although that's starting to change. But why would we have that definition? I mean, we all know what this means. And we've moved to this place where parents are being deemed abusive if they will not transition their children, or they can lose custody of their kids. Kind of before I want to get into that, though, I want to give just a shout out because Maine today killed the bill. It killed the Transgender Sanctuary bill, or should I really call it, it's a sex change travel bill, because anyway, Maine killed it today. So that was, it's a big win. Yesterday, Ohio passed its ban on gender interventions on children. So we're moving now in the right direction. We're undoing some of those harms that we've seen for the last 15 years. Now, the interesting thing about Maine is Maine's trans sanctuary bill was identical to California's. And Minnesota passed a trans sanctuary bill after California did. So we are the beginning of all these bad bills. It all happens in California. Although really transgenderism started in Boston with them opening up the first gender clinic in 2007. It's really California that's pushing the laws. And our laws get passed in every other state, every other blue state, and get passed federally. So our really bad bills, we have a really bad law about foster care that requires any person who's going to adopt or take in a foster care child has to commit to supporting that child's gender identity, whatever it is. And whatever that means, we don't know. Now the federal government is following that. So they're trying to do the same thing. We were the first with the sports bill, letting children decide whether they could play on whatever sport team they wanted to based on a feeling, based on their identity. And of course, we're seeing now in the federal space that Title IX is on the chopping block by Joe Biden. So we are at the beginning of the bad bills. We create the law and it spreads in a rapid way and in a terrible way. I don't think anyone has worse laws than California, except maybe Oregon, because Oregon has a law that permits 15-year-olds to get gender interventions without parental consent. But we're going to do one better, actually, in California. We passed a bill this last year where 12-year-olds can leave their family home for any reason, no claim of abuse by the parents, no claim of self-harm, harm to others. That child can walk out the door and not come home that day and go into a residential facility. This is all designed to take kids who are gender confused and permit them to leave their families home. I argued with a lot of lawmakers, no, this has nothing to do with trans. Well, sure it does. It has everything to do with it. And even the intent of the bill talks about trans kids, just the whole first page is about trans kids. So it's designed to take these children. So parents in California are allowed to parent their children until they're 12, and then the state can take them. Why is California doing this? They're doing it for a lot of reasons. One, we talked about foster care kids. Once a child is 12 and they're in foster care, they get to dictate the gender interventions that they want. So that is feeding the medical community. These children are commodities. Each one of them is worth about $1 million to the medical industry. And then there's more money on this. So when a child is 12 and runs away from home and goes to a residential facility, those residential facilities charge about $14,000 a month to house these kids. So there's more money made from a child. The parents, I don't know how the parents get the child back because the parents have not been deemed abusive. So the parents then go into the court system and spend more money on lawyers and taking parenting classes and whatnot. So this is the big cabal of the money. And do they get the child back? We don't know. Residential facilities are also unlocked in California and almost in every other state. And so these children can come and go as they please. And guess who sits outside those front doors? Sex traffickers and drug dealers. So now we keep moving into, now these children are monetized again. They're monetized now as sexual beings or used as sexual beings. So this is the big picture. This bill is going to come to every other blue state in the nation. This is what we do. We pass the worst bills, and then the other blue states say, that's a great idea. We're going to do it too. Carrie, you brought up a bill that is, again, affecting all, or it's a law, not a bill, it's a law passed. It affects all 49 states. And this law says that if a doctor violates Florida law or any other state law that prohibits them from removing children's healthy body parts, if they run away to California, they're safe. It's like base for them. Those doctors can just get on a plane and come to California, and we hide them. The long arm of the law does not reach them. The police will not arrest them. And so there is an opening for people like, Dr. Gallagher, who removes, girls' breasts by the truckload. She can violate the law and then come to California and hide. Also, California doctors who violate other states' laws also are bulletproof. So California is going to be just the trans sanctuary of the nation, and we're just going to have nothing but transgender people, in the near future. I'm kidding, but that's where we are in California. It's just absolutely nutty. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize if you're looking at laws, and I encourage everybody to look at your laws as they're coming through your legislature. There are really good outfits who already find the bad bills and they post them on their website. So you can just go through them. You don't have to be a lawyer or have any great skills. There's the Family Council is almost in every state in the nation, and they post the bad bills. And so you can watch them and you can track them. And every time a bill says anything about school, that's a trans bill. If anytime they say anything about mental health, it's a trans bill. Foster care, children's rights, those are all transgender bills, hidden. They're hidden name bills. They're all transgender bills. So you have to kind of look at them. We have one where California is spending $50 million on teaching teachers how to assess mental health issues with students. That is an absurdity. Why are they doing this? Because an earlier law was passed that asked teachers to be on the lookout for LGBTQ kids and to make a determination if the parents are supportive. Let that settle in for a moment. They're asking the teachers, first of all, to make mental health assessments, teachers. And then they're asking them to do a little detective work on whether those parents are good parents or not, in their eyes, whether that parent is supporting the child's trans identity. And then what are they going to do with that information? Well, we know they're going to find that parents are abusive. That's where we are moving in a rapid clip. It's already happening in the courts that parents who refuse to transition their kids are being deemed abusive, or at least temporarily, long enough for them to take the child from the parents while they're making the final determination. And in that time, the child may be placed on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, into foster care, and the child is going down that path. And then maybe 2 years later, the parent is absolved of the child abuse claim. Well, it's too late. Oftentimes it's too late. So those are all really nasty, scary things that I'm talking about. I'm always so pleasant.
Well, it is shocking, and to your point earlier, I think a lot of us, as parents, busy, doing all our activities of daily living, and and also just coming from a place of compassion, thinking, oh, what could go wrong here? This sounds great, but it is just kind of taken on a life of its own, where there's no questioning allowed, or there's just this presumption of guilt if you aren't going along with any of this. So that is what's so scary. I was also just in my own research looking up just back, I think California was the first state back in 2012 with SB 1172, where they started conflating, basically say it like a therapy ban. And they basically put in, trans identity as a part of something you couldn't question, because you would be converting someone, as if, again, we see a lot this conflation of a trans identity with being gay, which it is not the same. And so how have you seen that play out in California, in terms of that's like over 10 years ago now? You think how that's played out with sort of squashing people being scared to question anything because they're being told they're to convert somebody, instead of just the normal things we do to try and explore why is somebody confused about their gender.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. So the conversion therapy
Yeah.
laws actually don't bar a therapist from doing their job. They can still do their job. They just can't say you're really a boy or you're really a girl. But it has it silences these doctors, and it scares them, which was the design of it, was to make them afraid. Because really what therapy is should always be exploratory. You don't take you don't take the patient's word for it. You try to understand what is going on. Why are you distressed? Why are you distressed with your body? Why do you believe that you're actually the other sex? Why do you believe you want to have hormones? And really, there's a code, and I didn't know this when my daughter was going through it. I called all these therapists and psychiatrists. This is before, I even knew what I was stepping into. And one of the psychiatrists said, I will not treat the gender dysphoria, but I will treat the depression and anxiety. And that was code. I didn't catch it. That was code for, I'm going to find out why your daughter is so unhappy with her biological sex. And so I should have hired her, but I didn't, because I'm like, well, it's gender dysphoria. I want her to get looked at. But it was really code for, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to find out what is ailing your daughter. Why does she have self-loathing? And a lot of therapists don't understand that they can dance around the issue, because really the way to heal a child who has gender distress is to find out what is the underlying issue. It's just like anorexia. It's not that the child is really fat. What makes the child think that they are not worthy, that they need to be in control, that that they need to starve themselves. That's the issue. That's what therapists should be looking at, and they can. That is perfectly legal. But again, you do sort of have to have a law degree to understand that. But a lot of therapists are realizing that they can still do their job, and they can do it well, and they can explore and find out what is really going on with that child.
Yeah. Well, I want to just remind. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I always like. I know we're at some point we're going to open up for questions soon, but I leave people with good news, because there is so much good news. And yes, the other side is getting more aggressive, and more children are coming out as trans identified, and we know this because the faucet is school, and they've been teaching it really aggressively. So we knew the numbers were going to go up. But at the same time, the pushback is so immense now. We have 23 states that have passed bans on gender interventions. 2 years ago, we had 0. I believe it was 0, right? This is a huge movement. This is really, really progressive. The people in California, we put forth a ballot initiative at protectkidsca.com to take it to the voters of California, whether they are okay with removing sex organs of children, whether they are okay with experimenting on children's bodies by stopping puberty and using cross-sex hormones, and whether they're okay if boys are in girls' changing rooms, and whether they agree that schools should lie to parents when their child is gender questioning. We've done polling. The polling is overwhelmingly in support of no. Californians, even liberals, independents, Republicans are against this. So there is a mechanism. If you're in a blue state, there is a mechanism for the people to make the law. And that's exactly what we're trying to do in California with protectkidsca.com. And granted, it's California, so only California voters can vote on it, but anyone can help California pass this. And how they do that is by donating to Protect Kids. Because California, like we just explained, we pass the nasty, terrible laws, and we pass we're the gift that keeps on giving. Imagine if the bluest of blue states falls because the people who are 2-to-1 Democrat say, no, we've had enough of this. That will change the course for the United States in one fell swoop. California falls, every other state will fall. So it's really important. We're the first taking this shot. We're the first, and we're the biggest. I mean, I decided, let's go big. Why not? Everyone thinks California is a lost cause. It's not. It's really not. It's the end all be all. It is the beginning of gender and the end of gender. So let's take our shot. And there's a lot of other states out there that have the ballot initiative process and could do the same thing that we're doing. It takes a lot of money. We don't have all that money yet, but we've got the manpower. The number of people that are collecting signatures for us is amazing. The left, Democrats are my biggest donors. That's insane. Let that settle in. Democrats are my biggest donors. I have women who are, radical feminists going to Walk for Life events to gather signatures, putting their differences aside to protect our kids. And that's just an amazing thing. So I always like to leave with something really upbeat, because we can do this and we are successful. And one last thing, those people who are afraid, stop being afraid. Stop. Really, I don't have any superpowers. I've been doxxed. I didn't even know it. That's how much it affected me. They put my name out there, my family, whatever. I didn't even know. That's how little it affected me. They are running from the ships right now. They are rats fleeing the ships. They are more afraid of us than we are of them. I'm a nobody. I'm just a mom. Gavin Newsom, our governor, watches everything I do. That's an amazing feat because they're afraid of what we're doing. California hasn't put forth any really bad trans bills in 2024. Now we have a few more weeks, but that's because the parents got angry and the parents started showing up and the parents started calling and having rallies and writing letters and sending emails. That's the power of us, and we need to tap into it every single day because we can end this.
It's so true, Erin, and so inspirational because you are out in California and it just seems like, oh my gosh, it's such a behemoth and such a Goliath. And so, yeah, we really, part of why we wanted to do this webinar is because we at FAIR are just so, really want to get the word out about your grassroots efforts and what you're doing so people can become aware because, as you said, it requires money to do all this in terms of, collecting the signatures, all manpower involved, which hopefully you could, share a little bit more, but just getting the word out there, it requires money. So we want people to look at the website. And if you're in California, to figure out how you could, help Erin collect signatures, and, get the word out. Because we put the information in the chat, and we'll get to, we got questions piling up, so we'll get to those in a minute. But how can you just speak toward just the sort of nuts and bolts, like as a busy mom, like how did you do it? You just went to the Secretary of State website, figured out what you had to do, and I know there's some issues with like wording on the ballot and like the collecting of signatures. You probably have to have 25% more than they actually need. I mean, I'm in Illinois, so I know how all this goes.
Yeah.
But maybe you could speak a little bit more to people just to give them a little more like detail as to like everything that you have to do so far and how you're doing that and excelling at it.
Sure. Well, first of all, you just have to have a will. Like that's the first thing. And you don't listen to anyone when they say, no, you can't do this or this is impossible. Sure it is. Sure it is. I had 2 bills taken up last year that I wrote out of 6. And I might have another 2 this year. Like it's possible. These are, the Texas bill was pushed by a couple moms in Texas. I mean, this is the power of us. You can get help. There's a lot of free legal advice out there. People will help you. As far as the ballot initiative, it's hard. We need to raise close to $6 million. That's a lot of money. It can happen because, there's a lot of billionaires out there. And, this is a cup of coffee for them. Maybe a couple cups of coffee. But there is money out there, and there's grassroots donations that are coming in, and they can come in from any state. And I encourage people, I know you're not in California. If you're not in California, why do you care? You care because our bills affect you, because your children can run away to my state and get interventions. And not only that, we keep them. You can't get your child back once they run to California. And good luck finding an attorney to help you get your child back once they're here. So we affect everyone. So people should be donating as much as they can. It goes 100% back to the ballot initiative. I haven't received a paycheck in 4 years. And any money I receive from any speaking engagement, I put it right back in. We need to collect 550,000 signatures. That's a lot of valid signatures, which means we need to collect about 850,000 overall, because we know that California is going to try to disqualify as many signatures as they can. So we need to have a pretty big safety net, but it's doable. I mean, and what's the alternative? The alternative is to sit back and wait. Those of us in blue states, we're going to be waiting for a really long time unless we take up the mantle. Interesting thing is that once we start at protectkidsca.com, Democratic lawmakers are willing to meet with me. That's a first. More Republicans are willing to meet with me because they understand our power. We have been silent for a long time because we're scared or we think we can't do it. Never say can't. You can always do this. And if you ever need help, you can reach out to me, and I'll get you started, because it really, I'm not any smarter than the rest of the people in the world. I'm really not. I'm just driven, and I take my anger and I turn it into energy.
So inspiring. There's a bunch of questions piling up, and I just start with this one. How should liberals respond to the rhetoric that those who oppose gender identity are quote unquote oppressive, quote, denying, lived experience, unquote, and quote unquote, encouraging suicide? So I think just, you in the grassroots, talking with people who might need to, be persuaded or come up, with these kind of retorts. How do you approach that so you can talk across, bridge these differences?
So I use a couple different methods. I talk about love, and isn't it the most kind thing to tell a child that they're perfect just the way that they were born? And shouldn't we accept all children as being perfect and not needing fixing? Isn't that the kind way to look at a child? Is that they're perfect? Because that's how I choose to look at a child, is that they're perfect. And I don't want them to become lifelong medical patients. I also talk about, depending on who it is, that this movement is actually homophobic and racist, because it's both of those. It's homophobic because we're telling boys who like to play with fairies and dance around in pink tutus that they're actually a girl. They're likely to just grow up as a gay man. Big deal. We're actually transing the gay away. In Iran, and I use this one too, I'm like, would you agree that in Iran that it's cruel that they force gay men to transition or get killed? Every American would say that is awful. That's awful. Well, that's what we're doing to children. That usually shuts them down. And the suicide stats are higher after they transition. There are no studies showing that kids are committing suicides in mass numbers because they can't transition. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, no one heard of a trans kid. So where are all those bodies of those kids who were unable to transition 20 years ago? Where are all the suicides? Our suicide rates are the highest in more than a decade right now for 10 to 14-year-olds and 15 to 25-year-olds. We're moving in the wrong direction. So those are the little things.
Yeah, right. Those, I mean, you have to, know the information, because a lot of people, are coming to this with, compassion, thinking that they're part of something that's helping people. And I think it's really important to be able to communicate that actually what we've found is this has exploded, and that kids are being misdiagnosed and funneled into a medical pathway that it's actually not solving, mental health issues at all, but is making them worse. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to, really understand all that and be, communicating it, but it can be challenging. Someone in here, and I had heard a little bit about this because I wanted to ask you about this too, that addressing the misleading, or they're stating the misleading California AG naming of the proposed ballot initiative. And maybe you could share with it. The person here says it's called Restricting the Rights of Transgender Children, and how to overcome that, because it's, as I understand, you propose how you want the ballot initiative to be named and worded, but ultimately the state of California decides. And so have they made a final determination how it's going to be on the ballot if you get the signatures?
Well, we are, I'm going to file the lawsuit probably on Monday. I wanted to file it a week ago, but we're filing a lawsuit on the name and title because it's biased, prejudicial, and it's actually untruthful. Some of the statements made in the summary are factually incorrect. And, an interesting thing, Rob Bonta, the Attorney General under the code, is the one who gets to write this. And the reason why he is tasked with that is because he's supposed to be impartial. He can't be impartial. He has joined every amicus brief in the country for the bans for gender interventions on children. He is the leading attorney on the amicus briefs about males in female spaces. So of course he's not impartial. He's actually a plaintiff in a lawsuit against a school district for their notification policy. So we knew we were going to get a bad name. That's a given in California. And is it going to make it more difficult? Sure, it is. But there's also data that shows our polling is so strong. It is 75%. That's a huge number. Even with a bad title and summary, it doesn't change the actual campaign at the end of the day. People know what this does, regardless of his playing with the names. It makes it more difficult. And he did this on purpose. I mean, let's talk about the bill that just passed in Ohio. It is called the SAFE Act. And ours is restricts rights. He did this on purpose. But there's nothing we can do except file the lawsuit. We are not empowered with changing the name. We can go to the courts and ask the judge to change the name to be a neutral name, and that's the best we can do. Hopefully we win.
Yeah.
I think we're going to win, actually.
Oh my gosh. Well, no, that's a good, again, optimistic can-do approach, because like Illinois, where I am, is similar to California, and you do have to just, keep pushing through. And it sounds like from your polling that it's extremely supported across, different political groups. So that's really encouraging, but discouraging that the state is even playing with, just an honest name to the bill to try and confuse voters. So,
and it might backfire. It might backfire on them and get the voters angry that he's trying to pull a fast one on them. I mean, look, it's going to backfire on him. He's running for governor. He filed a lawsuit against a school district. And in that lawsuit, he said that all parents basically are abusive, that no parent should learn when their child is struggling with gender because they're potentially abusive. This man is calling all parents abusive. I mean, that's an insane statement. He also put in that complaint that 86% of all transgender kids have contemplated suicide. First of all, that's a made-up number. But let's just assume that that's true, just for giggles here. He wants the parents not to know that their children are potentially suicidal? Really? Only the school's going to know? The school that ends at 2:30 every day, that's not there on the weekends, summer, those teachers don't give out their cell phone. 95% of all suicides happen at home for children. And you're going to now keep the parents in the dark so they won't know to be on the lookout, to hide the drugs and the poisons? I mean, really, what is he thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the logic doesn't make sense in terms of kids' mental health and what you do to support it and who their infrastructure is around them. I mean, there's a few questions here somewhat related to that in terms of, how the politicians have gotten so off track with this in, states like California, Illinois, Minnesota, the big blue states, where somehow, what the people advising them or the information they're getting is feeding them this very distorted, view. I mean, what have you seen or garnered, in California? I guess the Disinformation Pipeline about what is really going on. Like you quoted, the Williams Institute that has done a lot of reports and who funds them, and they, there's just sort of this propagation of a lot of this information that is not accurate. And I guess if you could speak towards that pipeline to the politicians in California.
Well, truth be told, so these politicians they have about 2,000 bills that they're looking through. They have staff who advise them on this, and the staff are newly graduates. So we're talking young people who have had this gender ideology taught to them, through high school and college. So you already have that break. You have the legacy media who refuses to print the truth about what is going on and about the science. I'm a Democrat. I had no idea because I was a good little Democrat. I read the New York Times and the Atlantic and listened to NPR and did all those things. God forbid I would listen to Fox. And so it was all hidden. So they don't see the truth. They don't really see all what's happening with detransitioners. So they are oblivious. They don't read the bills half the time. And then on top of it, they don't hear from us because we're silent and we don't show up and we bellyache and we complain and we pass articles back and forth to each other. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. That doesn't do anything. Showing up and knocking on their doors. I mean, I sit in Sacramento and I sit in the lobby and wait for them to have to go to the bathroom, and then I go after them. Hi, did you know this? I have some things for you. It's hard work. It's hard work, but somebody has to do it. And it's us, it's the parents. We have to go do this stuff. And there's one, there's a story, I'm sorry I'm going on about this, but there was a Republican who I spoke with and I told her my story about my child. And she said, that happens? They changed their mind? She didn't even know that because she's probably too busy to really look at what Segam's doing or Fair is doing or, all these Substacks writers are doing, really clueless. And she's a conservative. So we need to educate. And how do we do that? That's us, folks. That's us. That's us sending emails. I put together a binder on everything about gender and gave it to her. The study from Sweden, Norway, Finland. Here you go. Here's the suicide studies, and with little summaries. So in case she just wanted to read through bullet points and wanted to see if I was telling the truth, here you go. You create the encyclopedia for them and you educate them. That's our job as parents, because no one else is going to do it.
Yeah, that it's such a good point, such a good reminder, and that's what we've been trying to do at FAIR and FAIRs, and is just educate, get the information out there so people are going the next level, besides pounding on the table or pulling their hair out or getting despondent. And we had a booth at the American Academy of Pediatrics in October in DC, and we brought 5D transitioners, Jamie Reed, who's a whistleblower from St. Louis, and some other folks. And I mean, just to your point, Erin, it was just unbelievable. I mean, most of the pediatricians were just so friendly, wanted to talk and learn, kind of like, I know something isn't right, and we're open to it. But I mean, we met pediatricians. I recall a couple pediatricians in California who had never heard of a detransitioner, which, is shocking, because there's nothing in healthcare where there isn't some type of harm or something, a negative consequence. So just the premise that this medical intervention would not have anybody who ever regrets it or have harm just doesn't seem to comport with being a physician. But yet we met these pediatricians who had just not heard of a lot of this information. And so it's super important, as you said, to just educate, people on it, and not assume that they just don't want to hear about anything. I think a lot of people are receptive to learning. But kind of along those lines, this segue, there's a couple questions in here, and I sometimes struggle with this as a practicing physician, is talking to people about like the data. We get trapped in like, well, here's all the data, and this should just all make sense. So this shouldn't be going on because here's all the data. And people will say, gosh, there's been so many critiques of how the studies are low quality, and how, the WPATH standards of care, it's really a misnomer. It's not really, standards that have based on high quality evidence. But when you try and talk to people, get super heavy into the data as being persuasive, sometimes people just kind of glaze over and it's too much. So I guess a question for your experience in this and persuading people, how do you strike that balance between talking about the data, but also not getting, too wonky where people get like lost in the whole thing and go, I just want kids to do well, and I don't want to be called, a transphobe, and they just sort of shut down.
Yeah, I mean, again, I do talk some data sometimes,
Yeah.
but mostly you humanize it. Again, going back to the fact that it's unkind to tell, what is a trans child? What is that? That is a child who hates their body. Let's agree on that. Let's agree on that it's okay for a little boy to, wear sparkles, and he is still a little boy, is he not? You get to these places because the argument falls apart for them pretty quickly, because it's an illogical argument. It's very illogical, and I mean, depending on who you're talking to. Look, if it's somebody who's really deep into the belief system, I don't bother, because there's no way we're going to have a rational discussion. And every time I block them in with a rational discussion, like, well, I like to play in the mud. Did that mean I was trans? What is a woman? Like, these questions that they can't answer, and then they just yell and say, you're a bigot. you're a transphobe. And then the conversation's gone. I just say, well, it's devolved down into name calling. I guess you don't have any arguments left, but very nice talking to you. And I talk a lot about my own child, and I show them the picture of her now, and what she would have been. She would have had a beard and her breasts cut off, and she's so feminine. And people that, well, that was a phase. No, it's the same story with every child. They are committed. They believe that they are. Yeah, so the conversations have to happen with kindness and slowly. And if you just bombard them with stat after stat after stat, you're not going to hit them. And everybody's different. Like, I even look at the thing that made me understand right away that there was no such thing as a trans child was looking at the Tavistock graph of the number of kids. It went up 5,000%. And my critical brain said, nothing in medicine grows at 5,000%. Naturally, nothing. This is impossible. So I may have thought my daughter wasn't trans. And then I came to the realization, none of these kids are. This data, it doesn't make any sense. It's a contagion. We know this just from that. And, and some people, you hit on different things, like transing the gay away is something that will resonate with other people.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there was one comment in here that someone was kind of saying, and I didn't mean to just suggest that just moms or parents are the only ones concerned. I mean, to your point about the gay community, there's a lot of groups now who are just part of this, coalition of just people that may have had differences on other issues, but have come together because, in the early studies have shown, and even as you mentioned in Tavistock, I mean, this is really a scourge and a devastation on gay kids that, pre kind of their sexual awakening, they don't know, but they get sucked into this. And instead of letting them become gay kids and saying that that's beautiful, that's who you are, they're sort of shuffled into some medicalization, which is so regressive to a time when gay people were medicalized for being gay. And so I didn't mean to again suggest this is just sort of like, moms and dads in middle America or something. This is really affecting a lot of communities, and the gay community is just, to me, just tragic that gay kids cannot just grow up in gay young adults and just
Right.
be gay and just be left alone and know that
and the
that
gay
is a
community
beautiful
is gonna,
thing for them. Yeah.
the gay community is going to get hit on both ends on this. And that's
Yeah.
why they need to actually be some of the loudest voices out there, because you're going to have the really conservative people, the extreme right, saying, this is what gay marriage started. And this is, they're going to get blamed for the jump from the LGB over to the T, and the harms to children, because the trans activists are tethering the LGB to the T and the Q. So they need to detangle from that. So they have a really heavy burden. And yes, it's their community that's getting decimated. Also, autistic kids are, the predominant kids who are falling for this. We see that. We had a D-Trans Awareness Day in Sacramento. We had 11 detransitioners there, 10 are autistic. That's a crazy stat. That's crazy. We're harming people who are already vulnerable. Again, it's a hateful movement.
Yeah.
You can take all the words from the left and actually use them. It's also, I was saying it's a racist movement. Do you know who they're going after? They're going after the Hispanic community in droves. They dropped off all these trans children's books to the poorest neighborhoods and schools in California. That's where they started. They went out to the farmlands and Fresno, where the parents work 2 jobs, don't speak English, and filled those libraries with children's books about transgenderism. So they're going after these kids. And so it's cruel. It's really cruel. It's taking advantage of immigrant families.
That aspect you just said about the Hispanic community, I had never heard of, and yeah, that's these vulnerable populations. It's really heartbreaking, and for all kids, we need to really pay attention to all this. And as you said, California started up a lot of this, spread it across, and I mean, we're so thankful to know that there's people like you out there really trying to do the right thing. And I mean, we only have another minute or so, so I want to just give you the opportunity to again share like how people can get in touch with what you're doing in California, and anything else you want to say.
Sure. Well, if you want to know more about the initiative, go to protectkidsca.com. If you want to reach me, go to info@protectkidsca.com. I'm not going to give out my personal email anymore. I always did that, and because now I'm getting just way too many. But I do respond. There are a lot of groups out there that are able to help. And there's a lot of lawyers that are willing to donate their time. There are therapists who want to explore why your child is feeling distress. And there's a lot of things that people can do. Okay, if you are still unable to be visible, you can donate. You can donate to other nonprofits or to Protect Kids, and you can help prevent these kids, because more and more of these children are regretting, and we're seeing as the number of people transition goes up, the number of people that detransition. I'm working with a gentleman right now here in San Francisco, 29 years old, African-American guy, transitioned while he was in a state of mental disarray, bipolar, schizophrenia. The doctors don't know what to do with him. He went all the way, and he is just riddled with infection after infection after infection. We need to stop this cruelty to humans. And everyone has a sword in their back pocket, whether you think you do or don't. You can do something to help move the ball forward. So thank you so much, Farah, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'd love to see you, Carrie.
Oh, well, it is an honor, Erin. You're so inspirational, and just remind everyone that you can do something, on this issue. I mean, FAIR focuses on this because this is such a contentious issue across the country, but also it's just, a huge ethical issue in medicine, and not being able to talk freely about the evidence, the harms, is just the opposite of, ethical medicine. So that is one of the reasons we focus on it. But FAIR, does a lot of great things, a lot of different issues. So we encourage you to, look at our general website and FAIR in Medicine, and we will have more great webinars in the future. And I know Erin will be part of those too. So thank you everybody for watching, and we will try and email you answers to all your questions. We couldn't get to all of them, but thank you very much, and have a great night, and get involved.